Sienna Moore, the woman Ethan Sullivan cherished like a flawless pearl, had been drunk that night and was taken away by 5 strangers. To protect her reputation, Ethan spread word far and wide that it was me who had been taken, claiming Sienna had been by his side the entire night. The rumors spread like wildfire, sharp and cruel, lashing against me without mercy. Even the child I carried, his child, did not escape the venom of their words. They called it a bastard, something that should never have been born. My chest burned with fury as I confronted Ethan, each word tearing from me like shreds of my heart. "Did you even think about me when you did this?" He looked at me utterly calm and answered with a chill that froze my blood. "Sienna is still single. If this gets out, people will laugh at her, judge her, ruin her life." I stood there, my whole body numb, staring at the man I had loved with every part of my soul for 6 long years. In that moment, a truth sharper than any blade struck me. He had never truly loved me, and me was I truly worth so little to him. My throat tightened. My eyes stung and my voice broke into a painful cry. But Ethan didn't care. He turned away from me and gently wrapped his arms around Sienna, his eyes tender and protective. She curled into his chest, fragile and trembling, her white dress stirring in the breeze like a symbol of purity he treasured so dearly. When he finally turned his gaze back toward me, he avoided my eyes, as though the bitterness in them was too much for him to bear. Anger surged through me, boiling over. I couldn't stop myself. My hand flew across his face with a sharp crack that cut through the silence. The sound still hung in the air when Sienna rushed forward, placing herself between us, her eyes filled with wounded indignation. "How could you hit Ethan? He was only helping me." "Why are you so selfish?" Ethan looked momentarily unsettled, pushing Sienna aside before slowly pulling me into his arms, his voice low and coaxing. "Don't cry, Madison, but Sienna isn't married yet. If word gets out, it will destroy her reputation." I laughed bitterly, the pain in my eyes so deep it could drown. "And what about mine? Do you have any idea what people are saying about me?" My voice shook, but each word landed like a dagger. "They call me a whore, Ethan. They say our child is a bastard." For a flicker of a moment, guilt shadowed his eyes, but he said nothing. Sienna swayed as if she might collapse, her face pale and stricken. "It's my fault, Madison. I'll go explain everything." But before she could move, Ethan drew her back into his arms, his tone heavy with sympathy. "No, Sienna, you don't need to blame yourself." Then he turned to me, his face torn between regret and stubbornness. "Madison, if you can ignore the gossip, then it's nothing for you. But for Sienna, it's different. She's too naive. She just had too much to drink and made a mistake. If this gets out, her life will be ruined." Sienna dabbed at her eyes, her voice trembling yet full of concern. "But your child will still be called a bastard. Let me take all the blame. I couldn't stand it any longer." My voice came out raw through my tears. "You don't care, but what about your child, Ethan? Will you let it be born under the weight of such filth? 10 years from now, 20, when our child goes to school to work, do you think it won't crush them?" His eyes flickered with the pain. He tried to hide, his voice shaking. "It's not that bad. 3-4 years from now, no one will remember." Tears streamed freely down my cheeks. "So Sienna means so much to you that you would destroy my reputation and our child's. What am I to you, Ethan?" He pulled me close, his voice hoarse with a quiet plea. "I'm sorry, Madison. But Sienna once saved my life. I can't turn my back on her." I pushed against him, striking his chest, trying to free myself, but his arms only tightened, holding me like a cage. My screams tore through the air, filled with pain and fury. Why must paying her back come at my expense? Ethan Sullivan brushed everything aside, his tone still warm, as if gentleness could erase the betrayal. He told me not to worry, that he would not let me endure humiliation for long, that once Sienna Moore was married, he would make the truth known and restore my name. The conviction in his eyes felt like a death sentence to my heart. In that moment, all my pain hardened into a single decision. I could not keep this child. Ethan took me back to the house, Sienna trailing close behind. The moment I stepped into the living room, I knew my home had been transformed. The sofa covers were now a soft blush pink. The potted plants I had tended with my own hands were gone, and by the shoe rack sat a pair of delicate white slippers that were not mine. Ethan spoke in a careful voice, as if afraid of breaking me even more after what had happened at the hotel, explaining that Sienna had been traumatized and he was letting her stay until he could find her a suitable apartment. I curled my lips into a faint mocking smile, but said nothing. I simply looked at him with empty eyes. My calm seemed to unsettle him. His hands twitched restlessly, as though he didn't know what to do. That evening at dinner, I sat at the table watching him carefully place food into my bowl, as if those small gestures could win me over, but they only deepened the cold void in my chest. There was no warmth that could reach me now. Later that night, I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, my mind a tangled maze with no exit. Sleep would not come. After a while, I felt the mattress dip beside me. Ethan lay down gently and wrapped his arms around me from behind. His breath was close, but it carried a distance that could not be bridged. I did not turn to him. Instead, I raised a hand to push him away and spoke in a flat voice. "Don't touch me." His eyes were red, his voice breaking as he whispered into the darkness. "Madison, please don't treat me this way." Outside, thunder cracked, suddenly shaking the quiet air. His fragile words were drowned in the roar of the storm. I turned my head and looked into his reddened eyes. For a fleeting moment, something soft stirred inside me, but before I could speak, frantic knocking shattered the tension. "Ethan, help me," Sienna's voice trembled from the other side of the door. Ethan released me instantly and hurried to open it. She collapsed into his arms, her small face pale with fear. Shaking, she whispered, "I keep remembering that night." "I'm so scared, Ethan, will you stay with me?" His hand stroked her back in comfort, his eyes full of pity. When he looked back at me, his expression was apologetic. "Madison, that night was a storm just like this. The thunder terrifies her. I need to be with her tonight." Before I could answer, he turned away. Sienna left with him, and the room fell into a silence so deep it was suffocating. I lay back down, closing my eyes to hide the tears spilling free. "Ethan, do you know I am afraid of thunderstorms too? You once promised that every time the storm came, you would be by my side. Yet here you are forgetting every promise because Sienna whispered your name." I placed my hand over my stomach, trying to hold back the sobs. "I'm sorry, my love. I once longed for the day you would be born. But your father has changed. He is not worthy of being your father. I can only hope you will have a better start somewhere you can be truly happy." The next morning, Ethan fussed over both me and Sienna at breakfast before leaving for work. He had barely been gone an hour when his mother arrived. Without a word, she struck me hard across the face. The blow sent a rush of heat and dizziness through me. I looked at her with steady eyes that still betrayed the sting in my heart. Her gaze was cold, her voice laced with contempt. "At first I thought you were just a petty daughter-in-law. I never imagined you would dare to cheat. A woman like you cannot remain in the Sullivan family. Tomorrow you will sign the divorce papers with Ethan." She paused, her eyes cutting into me like blades. "And that thing growing inside you must be destroyed immediately. Even if it is born, the Sullivan family will never accept it." I swallowed the metallic taste of blood in my mouth and met her eyes with a steady, calm voice that cut into my own heart like a blade. "Then that's fine. I do not want to keep Ethan Sullivan's child anyway." I drew in a deep breath, my words sharp and final. "I will go to the hospital and end this pregnancy right now." The moment the words left my mouth, the door flew open and Ethan rushed in. Sweat beading his forehead, his face ashen as if my statement had knocked the air out of him. His voice rose in protest. "Madison, what nonsense are you talking about? I won't allow it. You cannot end this pregnancy and we will not get divorced." His mother's voice cut through his like a whip full of venom. "That thing inside her is a bastard. We do not even know who the father is. How can you be so blind that you cannot leave this cheap woman?" Ethan wrapped his arms around me instantly, his eyes sweeping over me in panic, as if to make sure I was unharmed. When he was satisfied I bore no fresh injuries. His shoulders eased just slightly, but his relief collided with his mother's furious glare. Faced with her relentless accusations, his eyes flickered, his lips parting as though he might defend me only to close again. The hesitation burned through me, but still a fragile thread of hope tugged at my chest. Just one word in my defense. Just one sign that he would stand with me would be enough. But when he finally spoke, his tone was unwavering, each syllable striking me like 1,000 knives. "I love Madison with all my heart, so I do not care about this. Even if the child she carries is not my blood, I will raise it as my own." His words thundered in my head, deafening, each one smashing into me until I could hardly breathe. That was my husband, the man I had loved so fiercely, lowering me into the depths of humiliation just to preserve Sienna Moore's image. Every word he spoke was another blade slicing into my chest. I felt my body turn to stone, the blood in my veins, freezing solid, leaving my heart torn open, barren, and hollow. Because of Sienna, the man I had given everything to, had nailed me to a cross of disgrace with his own hands. In that moment, whatever love I had for him disintegrated into nothing. I let out a cold laugh, my voice laced with icy contempt. It is not just your mother who does not want this child, Ethan. I do not want it either. When his mother stormed out, I shoved his arms away. He stared at me, his voice thick with pain. So you hate me this much, enough to throw away what we created out of love. I met his gaze, my words razor sharp. Yes, I hate you. You are not worthy of me bringing this child into the world. Anger flashed in his eyes, and his voice turned to steel, issuing a command. This child will be born. You will remain in the estate until then, and you are not to leave. He turned his back to me, avoiding the hatred burning in my eyes, and walked out. From that day forward, I was a prisoner in the Sullivan estate. He confiscated my phone and posted people to watch me day and night. There was no escape. I could not understand why he refused to let me go. If he no longer loved me, why not set me free? Days later, Sienna's mother arrived unannounced with a group of people. She swept in, her voice dripping with mockery. You carry a bastard and yet still cling to the title of Mrs. Sullivan without shame. She went on, her gaze darting to Sienna as she spoke. My daughter is carrying Ethan's child. If you have any decency, you will leave before you make a bigger scene. I froze, my eyes locking on Sienna. Pregnant. She was pregnant. My stare was cold as ice, but she avoided it, scurrying upstairs without a word. Her mother continued barking orders to the household staff. My daughter is carrying the son of the CEO. She cannot be made to stay in the guest room. Clean out the master bedroom, throw all of Madison's things out, and move Sienna in immediately. The staff, already poisoned by the rumors outside and emboldened by Ethan's absence, obeyed with open disdain. They scrambled to please Sienna's mother, tearing through my room and tossing my belongings as if they were trash. When my eyes fell on the jade bracelet my mother had left me lying shattered on the floor, rage exploded inside me, fierce and uncontrollable. Don't touch my things, I shouted, my vision burning red with rage. I lunged forward, grabbing the baseball bat from the corner and swinging wildly at anyone who dared to lay a hand on what was mine. The blows landed on Sienna Moore's mother, sending her stumbling and cursing, the entire estate descending into chaos. In the middle of the uproar, Ethan Sullivan burst through the door, his eyes wide in shock at the scene before him. What the hell is going on here? He roared. The servants who had been ready to lay hands on me froze instantly, their faces blanching under his glare, none daring to move another inch. I said nothing. Instead, I knelt and began gathering the shattered pieces of my mother's jade bracelet, my hands trembling. The sharp edges cut into my skin, but I felt no pain, only the icy ache spreading deep inside my chest. Stop picking those up, Madison. Ethan's voice softened slightly, but I didn't look up. I stayed focused on the broken pieces, my eyes distant and cold. Once she recovered from the shock, Sienna's mother barked loudly. Ethan, my daughter is carrying your child. When are you going to marry her? And as for this shameless woman, throw her out right now. Her voice was full of the arrogance of someone who believed she had his complete support, and her insults came without pause. Shut up, Ethan roared, his eyes blazing. I will never divorce Madison, and I will never marry Sienna. She tried to argue but was promptly shoved out by security, leaving the house in quiet once more. Quiet for the estate, but not for my heart. Ethan bent down, gathering the broken bracelet, guilt clouding his expression. I'll find the best craftsman to repair this for you. Please don't cry. I lifted my gaze to him, my voice calm, yet carrying a weight he could never grasp. Even if it's repaired, it will never be the same. No, it will never be the same. Ethan pulled me into his arms, his tone full of desperate conviction. In a few days, I'll take Sienna abroad to terminate the pregnancy. Once that's done, we can return to how things were. His promises felt hollow, unable to thaw the frozen space between us. Over the next days, Ethan stayed at the estate, dividing his attention between me and Sienna. He trailed after her, constantly fussing over her morning sickness, as if he were the perfect devoted partner. More than a month passed in my captivity, and my demeanor toward Ethan slowly shifted, not from forgiveness, but from calculation. I needed freedom. I needed an end. One morning I told him with a resigned air, You don't need to keep me locked up anymore. I've thought it through. His eyes narrowed in suspicion. I smiled faintly, my voice steady but laced with determination. The child is innocent, no matter what I'll give birth to it. Really hope lit in his gaze. I've never lied to you, Ethan. This time is no different. My tone was void of warmth. He pulled me into a tight embrace, his voice brimming with relief. In 2 days, I'll take Sienna abroad for her procedure. When she's recovered, I'll come back and we'll be happy again. I nodded, letting him hold me, hiding the cold hatred deep in my eyes. 2 days later, Ethan and Sienna left for the airport. I sat calmly in the living room, waiting for his mother to arrive. I knew her well enough to predict she wouldn't allow me to keep this child. And I was right. That afternoon, she swept in with a team of bodyguards. Tie her up and take her to the hospital, she ordered. I stood meeting her gaze evenly. There's no need. I'll go myself. But remember, it is you who is forcing me to end Ethan's child. She sneered, looking at me as though I were filth. That bastard inside you, and you dare claim it's Ethan's. Shameless. You may have fooled him, but you'll never fool me. This child must die. Silently, I reached into my pocket and switched off my phone, stopping the recording that had been running the entire time. I looked her straight in the eye, pressing out each word so she would remember them and never be able to take them back. Under her watchful glare and the escort of her bodyguards, I was taken to the hospital to end my pregnancy. I had told myself I was ready, but the moment I lay on that cold table, my tears slipped free without my consent. I'm sorry, my love, I whispered in my heart. I am not a good mother. When I woke in the sterile quiet of the hospital room, I was alone. The ache in my body was nothing compared to the heaviness in my chest. I reached for my phone, the familiar number glowing on the screen, but my fingers trembled, unable to press it. The loneliness pressed in until I couldn't bear it anymore, and finally I hit call. Madison, is that you? My mother's voice, warm and familiar, poured through the line. The moment I heard her, all the pain I had held in cracked open. Tears flooded my eyes again, my voice breaking on a single word. Mom, my sweet girl, why are you crying? Did that bastard Ethan Sullivan hurt you again? I'll have your brother come get you right now. Her voice was sharp with worry, urgent, like she wanted to be by my side this instant. I miss you, Mom. I choked out, the sobs rising no matter how I tried to hold them back. My heart ached for home, for her arms. Send me the address, and I'll come right away, she insisted, her concern making my chest ache even more. I miss you, Mom, I repeated softly, trying to hide the ragged sounds of my crying. I sent her the hospital address by text, then lay back in bed, letting my mind drift into memories. People always assumed I came from nothing. They saw a girl from a remote corner of the Northwest, living simply, and thought my family was poor. They didn't know that behind the modest life, my family was comfortable, even wealthy. My parents owned vast herds of cattle, but they kept to themselves, uninterested in the flashy world beyond the pastures. When I went away to university, Ethan fell for me at first sight. He pursued me for a year before I said yes, and during our 4 years together in school, our love was simple and pure. After graduation, he wanted to marry me, but his mother, Margaret Sullivan, fought against it bitterly. She looked down on my family, calling us unrefined country people, unworthy of her son. Ethan refused to give me up, even threatening to starve himself until she relented. Out of love for her son, she eventually agreed, but she refused to allow a wedding ceremony. We signed the papers quietly, without celebration or witnesses from his world. As his wife, I tried to transform myself into someone who could stand beside him. I learned floral arrangement, wine tasting, the art of luxury brands. I traded the freedom of running across open fields for the rigid grace of the social elite. But I hated the politics of that world, the hidden barbs in every polite conversation, the calculating smiles. I hated the way every interaction felt like a game of survival in some ancient court. Yet for Ethan, I endured it all. I believed that as long as we were together, we could overcome anything. I had thought we would walk through life side by side. But then Sienna Moore came back from abroad, and something shifted. Ethan's heart seemed to still be with me, yet his eyes sought her out far too often. Every request she made, he granted without hesitation. I warned him that his actions were crossing lines, but for the first time, he lost his temper with me. He admitted he had once been drawn to her, but now his only intent was to repay her for saving his life. He told me to stop being suspicious, to stop being petty. That fight lasted a month before he gave in, promising to keep his distance from her, and never show her favoritism again. Still, her presence hovered over us like a blade hanging by a thread. I could never truly rest. And now that blade had fallen, shattering everything we had built. I came back to the present, wiping away the tears that slid silently down my cheeks. This was a clean cut, I told myself. Better one sharp, decisive wound than 1,000 slow ones. From now on, there would be no more pain from him. When I returned to the open grasslands, it was as if I had stepped back into the embrace of my childhood, surrounded by the familiar warmth of my parents. That day, my mother and my brother came to the hospital, and the moment they saw my pale face, the pain in their eyes was impossible to hide. My brother's expression hardened as he looked at me. I told you before, Madison, I was against you marrying Ethan Sullivan for a reason. On the surface, he might seem devoted, but he's just a womanizer. He treats everyone with that same fake tenderness, like a central air system, blowing warm air in every direction. He was never the kind of man you could entrust your life to. You insisted on marrying him anyway, and now look at the pain you're in. Watch your words, my mother snapped, softly swatting his shoulder, her eyes brimming with tears. She loved him with all her heart. Why would you throw more hurt on her when she's already suffering? My gaze met my brother's, and the concern in his eyes undid me. Tears blurred my vision. I'm sorry, brother. He had been the first to oppose my marriage, convinced Ethan was untrustworthy, but I had been blinded by love and rushed headlong into it. Now all I had to show for it was the wreckage of my own heart. It's okay, my mother murmured, pulling me close. You're still young. Once we get you back home, we'll find you someone better. Her voice carried the steady warmth of someone who still believed I could be happy again. My brother didn't waste time. He had my transfer papers ready that same day. By evening, we were boarding a private plane flying back to the wide, endless plains where I truly belonged. Far away in another country, Ethan Sullivan was tending to Sienna Moore after her surgery. He sat by her bed feeding her small spoonfuls of chicken porridge when suddenly his chest tightened. The pain came sharp and sudden, as though something had seized his heart. His hand trembled, spilling the porridge onto Sienna's blanket. Ethan, what's wrong? She asked, her brows knitting with concern. Are you overexerting yourself? Come here and rest a bit. She patted the empty space on the bed beside her, an invitation laced with fragility. I'm fine, he replied quickly. I just remembered something at work. I need to call my secretary. Stepping into the hallway, he began dialing one call after another, but no one picked up. A ripple of unease spread through him. His secretary never ignored his calls. The silence on the other end gnawed at him. Anxiety coiled tighter in his chest until he couldn't take it anymore. He decided he had to get on the next flight back to find me. But as he turned to grab his jacket, the sound of quiet sobs stopped him cold. Ethan, can you stay with me a little longer? Sienna's voice cracked, her eyes wet with unshed tears. I'm so scared when I'm alone. Every time I close my eyes, I see their faces. Those disgusting men. And I feel the cold of the operating table all over again. Her fingers clutched the fabric of his shirt, trembling. He looked down at her fragile frame, the pallor of her skin, the raw fear etched across her features. She had just been through surgery. How could he possibly walk away? He told himself that back home his mother was looking after Madison. She had promised she would keep the baby, so nothing could be wrong. In fact, the thought of Madison brought an almost smug smile to his lips. He knew she disliked his closeness with Sienna, but Sienna had once saved his life, and he had admired her deeply before. Every time Madison's jealousy surfaced, he found it oddly satisfying, a reminder that she loved him enough to care. With that misplaced confidence, Ethan chose to stay overseas, devoting the next month entirely to caring for Sienna, never leaving her side. When he finally returned a month later, he strode into the mansion with his usual commanding presence. Madison, I'm back. His voice echoed through the empty halls, but there was no reply. The house felt stripped, the air still and hollow. Every trace of me was gone. My belongings, my clothes vanished as if I had never lived there. On the sofa sat his mother, chatting animatedly with Sienna's mother, their tones light, almost cheerful. You're finally home, she said, as though nothing were amiss. I've taken care of that cheap woman for you. She signed the divorce papers. Tomorrow you just need to go to the civil affairs office to finalize it. And the baby, Sienna's about 4 months along now, isn't she? You'd better arrange the wedding before her belly shows. A bride looks much better without a big belly in a wedding dress. Ethan stood there stunned, the weight of her words sinking in. But the damage had already been done. Sienna Moore's mother beamed, her voice honey-sweet. but laced with smugness. Our family is traditional. The wedding should be done in the Chinese style, grand, elegant, meaningful. The words hit Ethan Sullivan like a blow to the chest. He froze where he stood, every muscle locked, his voice rough when he finally managed to speak. What are you talking about? Your marriage to Sienna? Of course, his mother answered as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. You got her pregnant, didn't you? Are you saying you're not going to take responsibility? Margaret Sullivan's tone was sharp, her disapproval radiating from every syllable. When Ethan's voice trembled, edged with fury. Did I ever say I wanted to marry Sienna? His chest heaved as he shouted, My wife is Madison Carter. The words roared through the mansion like thunder. His eyes were bloodshot, his face contorted with the madness of a man on the edge. Where is Madison? Where's my child? His voice cracked, the unease in his gut hardening into dread. Your child. That was nothing but a bastard, his mother said coldly, her face a mask of disdain. Don't speak of that promiscuous woman again. She spent nights drinking in bars and being dragged off by strange men. A woman like her will never be worthy of this family. She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. Do you know what people are saying about the Sullivans? That you've been made a fool wearing a dozen green hats, and that another man is the father of her child. She's destroyed our reputation. If I had known she'd bring this shame on us, I would never have let you marry her. Ethan stopped thinking about that low-born girl. Where's Sienna? Didn't she come back with you? Weren't you two vacationing overseas? Sienna's mother looked around confused that her daughter was nowhere to be seen. Ethan's laugh was sharp and humorless, his eyes flashing with something unhinged. Her baby, it's gone. He stared straight into the eyes of both women, his voice turning icy. I made a mistake. I should never have let Madison Carter suffer for the sake of so-called gratitude. The bastard, he spat the word, was the one Sienna carried. She was the one taken by those men that night at Bar 39, not Madison. And I was stupid enough to throw away my wife and my own child for a baby that wasn't even mine. He began to laugh then, a sound that echoed through the vast room, twisted with grief, each note dripping with regret. Margaret Sullivan's expression faltered, her steps involuntarily retreating. Sienna's mother stood frozen, her earlier smile wiped clean, replaced by disbelief. No, she murmured, shaking her head. Sienna told me the child was yours. There can't be any mistake. Mistake. Do you think I wouldn't know whether I touched her or not? Ethan's voice boomed thick with rage. He dropped heavily onto the sofa, his bloodshot eyes locking on Sienna's mother with such venom that she blanched and shrank back. Without another word, she turned and fled the mansion. Margaret was quick to recover her tone, dripping with scorn. It doesn't matter. You're a capable man. You can marry another society girl any time you want. That girl from the Northwest, I never saw her as worthy of you. She's nothing but a country nobody. Even if she gave birth, the child would be nothing special. You should marry someone with pedigree. Then your children would be born clever and refined. Get out of my sight. Ethan's roar was like a clap of thunder, his fury filling every corner of the room. The only person I want is Madison, no one else. Margaret's lips tightened, her voice cold with disappointment. You've lost your senses over a woman. Calm yourself. I'll come back in a few days. Clutching her chest, she turned and walked out, leaving the mansion in a silence so heavy it pressed on the air. Ethan sank onto the sofa, staring blankly at the emptiness around him. His voice was a broken whisper, thick with anguish. Madison, I was wrong. Please come back to me. Far away back in the vast windswept Northwest, I stood on the familiar grasslands and felt an odd, deep calm. Just as Margaret had sneered, my parents had indeed been cattle ranchers, but that was only the beginning. More than 10 years ago, they had built their own empire, founding dairy plants that now supplied milk and cheese across the entire country. Over more than a decade of steady growth, my parents' company had become the leading dairy supplier in the country. Yet despite their success, they lived simply, quietly refusing every media interview and even paying to keep their names off lists of the nation's wealthy. When I was little, I once asked my father why. He smiled, his voice gentle as he explained, "Truly wealthy people never flaunt what they have. I do this to protect you and the family, and besides, the richest people in the country are never listed publicly at all." Once I arrived home, my mother insisted I rest for an entire month. Only when the color had returned to my cheeks did she finally allow me to roam freely again. The wide plains seemed to gather me into their arms. I rode horses, tended cattle and sheep, breathing in the wind and sunlight, until I felt I was part of the land itself. After so many stifling months in the city, a week of open skies felt like freedom. But the wind was sharp, and I wasn't surprised when I caught a cold and ended up in bed for several days. My father looked at me with a mixture of frustration and concern. Before grumbling, "You're as fragile as a chick. Starting tomorrow, you'll train with your brother." I frowned immediately. "No, Dad. Isn't that training only for heirs?" "Why would I need it?" "Because starting now, you're going to learn how to run the company," he said with finality. Why, I pressed, confused. "You already have my brother." My mother, seated beside him, gently stepped in. "In recent years, thanks to your father's and your brother's hard work, the company has grown bigger than ever. But the expansion has reached a point where your brother is starting to feel the strain. He can't handle it alone anymore. You need to step up and help him." The idea that my capable, unstoppable brother could be overwhelmed was hard to believe. Still, whether I liked it or not, my father soon pulled me into the company as his assistant. Both he and my brother became relentless teachers, cramming business knowledge into my head like they were stuffing feed into a goose. My peaceful days ended abruptly. My schedule became packed from dawn to dusk, my mind constantly spinning with reports, numbers, and contracts. Time blurred in the rush of work, leaving little space for thoughts of Ethan Sullivan. Before I knew it, a year had passed. Under my father's and brother's strict guidance, I learned to handle matters on my own, even closing deals without their help. Just yesterday, I'd signed a major contract and returned home exhausted. Dropping onto the sofa, I popped open a cup of yogurt, ready for a quiet moment, only for my brother to walk in, with more than a dozen tall, striking men behind him. Every one of them was over 6 feet tall and handsome enough that I had to look away. "What are you doing?" I stammered, feeling like a startled rabbit. "Finding you a man," he said casually as he dropped onto the sofa. "Pick one you like." I swallowed hard, stunned. Since when was my brother this open-minded? "I don't want to date anyone right now. I just want to focus on my career." "You don't have to date," he said matter-of-factly. "You just need someone to give you a child. I've already discussed it with Mom and Dad, with your impossible standards and dreamy ideas about romance. It's better if you don't get married. We have enough money to support you for life, but you still need someone to give you an heir." I blinked at him, half coughing in disbelief. "There are so many of them, and I don't even know any of them yet. Don't you think I need time to get to know someone?" He shrugged. "Fine, I'll give you a year. Pick someone and have a child." The moment he mentioned a year off, my eyes lit up. I smiled brightly and promised I'd take it seriously. Looking over the profiles he handed me, I began meeting them one by one. A year later, I made my choice. His name was Logan Brooks. He was very handsome, though a bit soft-spoken and hesitant in decision-making. What drew me to him most was that he'd grown up without parents. There would be no family interference. Despite his hardships, he'd earned a place at one of the country's top universities. He was intelligent with a high IQ, and I knew that would be an asset for the next generation. Over the year we spent together, I handled matters outside the home, while Logan took care of everything inside. He was steady, dependable, and always there when I needed emotional support. I didn't love him, not the way I once thought I would love someone, but I couldn't deny the quiet affection and warmth that had grown between us. Before I spoke seriously with my parents about the future, I'd already made up my mind. A marriage like this didn't seem bad at all. I no longer needed a love that burned like fire. A gentle, steady companionship could be just as worth cherishing. "I knew you'd choose him," my father said, with a knowing look in his eyes as he studied Logan. I narrowed my eyes suspiciously. "You and Mom are hiding something from me, aren't you?" My father smiled faintly. "Logan came here for you. Don't you remember? He's the boy you used to play with when you were little." The memories came rushing back of a sun-browned boy running beside me across the fields. I had been 9, spending my days on the ranch, and he had been assigned to watch over me and keep me company. Now, looking at the fair, handsome man before me, I couldn't help but think, it's true what they say. Girls change as they grow up, but boys do too. 6 months later, Logan and I were married. A year after that, I gave birth to our daughter, and our home was filled with joy. Logan was a gentle husband and a devoted father. From the moment our daughter was born, he took over her care, allowing me to return to work soon after my recovery. With his support, I quickly reclaimed my place in the family company, and before long, I was appointed vice president. That's how at a major industry trade show I came face to face with Ethan Sullivan again. The moment our eyes met, we both froze. Years had passed since I'd last seen him, and the man standing before me no longer carried the confidence and charisma he once wore so easily. He looked tired, worn down. When he saw me, his eyes lit with something unspoken, and he started to step toward me, only to stop short when he noticed Logan at my side, holding our little girl. His expression faltered, the light in his gaze, dimming into something like grief, then settling into a bitter smile. I met his look calmly, my heart untouched. I knew the story. Under pressure from his mother, Ethan had married Vanessa Grant. Vanessa was quick-tempered and suspicious by nature, and her first target was Sienna Moore. When she discovered everything Ethan had once done for Sienna, she publicly confronted her in the street with bodyguards at her side, dragging every sordid detail into the open. Sienna's reputation was destroyed. Everyone now knew she had been the other woman, and whispers spread that she had been assaulted. Her family's business collapsed, forcing them to leave the country with barely anything. Vanessa didn't stop there. She routinely showed up at Ethan's company, accusing random female employees of being mistresses. Innocent secretaries lost their jobs under her baseless suspicions. Ethan's marriage was a battlefield, arguments flaring up every 3 days, all-out wars every 5. The constant conflict drained him, and his judgment faltered. Poor decisions piled up, driving the company into decline. In the chaos, Vanessa maneuvered her family into stealing a major project from him, pushing the Sullivan Group to the brink of collapse. His mother, furious, stormed over to the Grant estate daily to demand answers until one day she was shoved to the ground and left with a spinal injury that kept her bedridden. Eventually, Ethan and Vanessa divorced, but he paid dearly. The company, already crippled, was left gasping for survival. The only reason he was at the trade show now was to seek partners and investors. But none of it mattered to me anymore. The day he chose Sienna and used me as a shield, whatever we had was gone for good. I looked at him without emotion, then turned away, slipping my hand into Logan's and adjusting my daughter in my arms. I walked out of the hall, passing Ethan like a gust of wind. Behind me, I heard his voice, soft and raw. "I'm sorry, I was wrong." The words came too late. I didn't look back. I had my own happiness now, and I had no interest in reopening the wounds of the past.